I can point it out.
Good evening. Good evening. We're going to start our Thursday, June 16th council meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this on the traditional lands of the Klama Nation. And I'd like to say that we're going to start off with my most favorite event, and that is recognizing athletes in our city who have achieved outstanding performance. I'd like to ask Councillor Almeida, who you know is very active in hockey, to introduce our guests, and then we will present them.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm excited to eventually bring up today. They're standing in the corner there is the Powell River under-11 female team. This year, they were the first team from Powell River to play in the all-female league in the Vancouver Island Association. The team did okay. They went 34-0, not losing. And I'm sure their coaches have said winning isn't everything, but it certainly is fun when that's all you do. They won 3 tournaments. They won the league. They won the playoffs. And unfortunately, there's no provincial championship for them to contest. Otherwise, that would have been fun. But they will have the rights to have the first female banner that will go up at our complex later on this summer. So we'd like to call the girls up. If you guys want to come and line up here in front of the desk, and we'll take a nice team picture and city pins. Congratulations, everyone. Council is super proud of you. You represented our city well. Come on this way, we'll give you.
Do that more.
Right. Now we'll get, we got the heavy lifting done. We'll get on to the easy stuff. We're going to start with the opening with announcements. So I'm going to start with Councillor Almeida.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mayor. We've got several things going on as we get to our warm season now. I have a few things that are just mentioned in the paper the last couple of weeks. So this Saturday, June 8th, there's a group of active motorbikers in town that are doing a motorbike show and shine. It's a hard one to say. Show and shine, with all proceeds going to the food bank. Domino's will be on site as well. I can't even remember the location they're meeting now, but if you look up the Peak online, look up Show and Shine for motorbike, you will find that there. It's happening on Saturday this week. Next Saturday, the 15th, if you grabbed your midweek this week, came out today, Lyft is celebrating their 40th anniversary, and there's a celebration happening at Willingdon Beach that is open for all to attend. And in 2 Saturdays from now, June 22nd, is the walk for ALS. That will also happen along Willingdon Beach. So if you have someone in your life or someone you know that's been affected by ALS, you know it's a tough disease. I've had a family member pass from that. So you can join the walk to help find a cure for ALS on June 22nd.
Thank you, Mayor. So Go By Bike Week is almost done. The last event is tomorrow, and so it's at the brewery from 4:30 to 6:30. There'll be free pizza for folks who rode their bikes there, and there is a convoy leaving from Pacific Point Market at 4 p.m. I believe, 4 p.m. And it's making stops along the way. For example, at even before Tawes, but Tawes and Willingdon. And so you can join the convoy and arrive there all together. And just I want to shout out to the Cycling Association for putting that on and encouraging people to go by bike. It's Pride Month. There are a number of Pride events coming up. I'm most excited in trivia. I'm a bit of a trivia nerd, but there's also a fashion show. We've got a parade coming up in July. So a number of really exciting activities. So look at Cuthat Pride for a listing of events there. This Saturday from 12:30 to 5:30, there is a food systems unconference at VIU, and an unconference means if you're interested in food security or farming or making sure that people have enough to eat, if you like gardening, you can head there and suggest topics that you would like to discuss and find other people to discuss them with and come up with ideas or solutions or learn about things. And so that's happening this, no registration, no cost to attend, 12:30 to 5:30 at VIU. Grad is this Saturday, so I want to shout out to all the students graduating from Brooks this year. If you don't have a ticket, you can watch online and support the graduating class of 2024. And then finally, this Sunday, Women in Business Awards are happening at Townside Brewery, and tickets include a beverage and snacks and that snack pack being a charcuterie snack pack and a networking opportunity. And so that's happening this Sunday, but tickets are on sale online and you need to get them by tomorrow. That's it for me. Thank you.
That's the doubt.
This weekend is one of Powell River's big events is the Spring Garden Tour, where if you're lucky enough, you can buy yourself a ticket and go and tour a number of gardens around the entire region. You're welcome to see what people are doing in their yards, look at how they're improving them, maybe buy a plant or two, hear some entertainment, and contribute to a fundraiser that goes to a number of good causes, including the local hospice society. So encourage everybody to come out. It's usually sold out, so I'm hoping there's a few tickets available. You can look online and find them. And it's going to be a sunny day, according to the weather person.
Councillor Southcott.
Nothing to add, Your Worship. I've basically been scooped tonight.
Councillor Elliott.
I'm unmuted now. So I just wanted to remind community members that we've been invited by Tla'amin Nation on June 21st to participate in the National Indigenous Day celebrations out in Tla'amin. They start, I think, right around noon and have various things happening, all of which are detailed on their website. Thank you.
Councillor Thom.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair, I just want to give everybody a preliminary heads up. There will be a news release coming out in the Peak soon regarding our first public ferry gathering to talk to BC Ferries personnel here in Powell River. There hasn't been one happen for some time now, and that was a result of some conduct of public members at another event somewhere else on the coast. But they have reinstated those public face-to-face meetings July 3rd from 6 till 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'm not sure exactly when it will end, at the Coast Hotel that evening. There's been a couple of changes that the public needs to be aware of here in Powell River, and that is because of the trauma they've had elsewhere and the reinstatement, they've brought forward a new code of conduct. And when you see the ad in the Peak, you will see that you're asked to register for the public event and sign a code of conduct electronically. But I was told today via email that it won't be just an electronic registration. You will be able to phone or use email in order to sign up for that public gathering here in Powell River on the 3rd. So please, I encourage as many of our citizens as possible to get out to that meeting. It's very important that BC Ferries hears directly from the public the concerns on our ferries, because obviously, as you well know, things are not getting any better on our trips to Vancouver, especially with the congestion. And as I stated in the council chamber here on Tuesday, with the World Cup coming in 2026, 2 years from now, you can imagine with the world coming here for 7 games in Vancouver and those tourists wanting to get out and see beautiful BC, a lot of them will be coming our way, and it'll be a shame if they can't get aboard a BC ferry. So please, I've got some ideas. I'm going to express them at that meeting that evening. So please come out and support that meeting and voice your opinion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So over the last couple of weeks, Council has been looking at protocols, how we make our meetings more efficient, and pretty built off advice that we've got from 2 of Canada's most recognized municipal advisors. And so I'm just going to briefly run over a few of these. And we're hoping that if they're implemented, it'll take some pressure off of staff, because right now they brought us breakfast. So we're hoping that we'll finish up before breakfast time. First of all, council meets to make strategic decisions. And in order to do that, we seek information from both the public and the staff. So after a presentation is made, council then has an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. And the important point here is, first off, it's to provide clarifying questions, not to provide comment on the delegation or the content. It's to allow us to have greater clarity. So what I'm going to do is the same process that we followed with announcements. So we'll start at one end and work around. And so after clarifying questions have been asked and our consultants emphasized, there is no need for a long preamble. You've heard the presentation, you know what's required in order to make a learned decision. You focus on those questions. So after we got clarification on the questions, then a motion will normally be put on the floor. And once the motion is put on the floor, there'll be an opportunity for councillors, if they wish, to provide a brief statement on what position they're adopting, and then we'll have a vote. Now, with regard to delegations, it's important that when a delegation is finished, the chair will thank the delegation, and then there can be clarifying questions asked of the delegation. But it's not council's position to question what a delegation has said or to comment on what they've heard. It's simply to see if there's clarifying questions. So with that, we're going to move to the opening adoption of the agenda. Motion to adopt the agenda, Councillor Isaacson, seconded by Councillor Almeida. Any questions on the agenda? All in favor? Passed unanimously. We'll move to the adoption of the minutes. First of all, we have the May 16th meeting. And then we have the May 14th meeting, and we have the April 8th and the March 14th. Is there Councillor Almeida.
I move that council adopt the meetings held May 16th, May 14th, April 8th, and March 14th, 2024.
Seconded by Councillor Isaacson. Any question on the minutes? All in favor of the motion? Passed unanimously. So we'll now move to delegations. 4.1 is Reed Bailey and Thom Odell. Would you come forward,
Yeah.
please?
Hi. Thank you.
There you are.
Yeah. It's hiding in the wings. Unfortunately, Thom, my counterpart, he's a regional agrologist with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. He's not feeling too well the last 2 days, so he's had to sit this one out. But that's all fine and dandy because, yeah, I'm here and ready to present. So I'm just going to share my screen here. PowerPoint presentation. I trust everyone can see that. Yes. In a second. Oh, okay. Okay. Just taking a second to load. There we go.
All right.
Right. So yes, my name is Reed Bailey. I'm the team lead for the land use planning team with the BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and here to present today on land use planning for agriculture in the province. Yeah. So quickly, what I'm going to run over. Going to tell you, why is agriculture important in the province, and I'll talk about 6 big pressures on farmland in BC. Talk about some tools in the toolbox that local governments have to support agriculture. Then run through some key messages and actions, and then we can follow that with any discussion or questions you may have. So first off, why should the province and local governments support agriculture? Well, here's why. Agriculture is a significant contributor to BC's economy, and the sector is growing. Farm cash receipts, that's income generated from farms, increased about $300 million from 2020 to 2021. And it's interesting you compare that to other sectors. For instance, the oil and gas sector, the agriculture industry actually outpaced the oil and gas sector in terms of income generated in 2020. The employment figures tell a similar story about the importance of agriculture to the provincial economy. There is about 31,000 people were employed in primary agriculture in 2022, and this is compared to 17,000 in forestry and logging, which has traditionally been viewed as the backbone of our province's economy. And this kind of goes without saying, but food security is more important than ever. The UN reports that the global food crisis is only getting worse due to things like the ongoing global conflicts and a changing climate, and really we should be doing everything we can to grow our own food. So we'll turn over now to some of the pressures on farmland, and it should come as no surprise, but arable land in BC is very limited and under a great deal of pressure. 6 of the key pressures facing the agricultural land reserve and the farming industry include that limited land base itself, the cost of ALR land, urbanization, housing, demographics, and a lack of industrial land. And I'll talk about each of these in turn. But it is interesting, too, that these pressures are really nothing new. Almost all these have existed in some form or another for the past 50 years, which is a primary reason why the Agricultural Land Commission and the Agricultural Land Reserve were created approximately 50 years ago. The key difference now, however, is many of these pressures are just so much more severe than they were back in the 1970s. So here we are. Here's a picture of BC, and you can see the green there. That's all the land in the ALR. There's a mix of agricultural capability, so different soil classes depending on where you are in the province. You may have heard this stat out there that 5% of the provincial land base is in the ALR. That might seem low, but it's actually even lower because this stat is quite misleading. For starters, 7% of that 5%, so 7% of the ALR is simply not available for farming. If you think of a large block of ALR land that might have, let's say, 100 properties, within that area, you're going to have roads, bodies of water, perhaps federal lands that are simply not available to be farmed. And then to exacerbate this, 54% of the ALR is Crown land. And if you think of Crown land, there's so many competing interests on Crown land, including mining, forestry, First Nations rights, recreation, so on and so forth. So a lot of this 54% of the ALR is just simply, again, not available to actually farm. It's worth noting too, there is some non-ALR farmland out there, but it does not have the same regulatory protections as land in the ALR itself. So it's a bit riskier to farm off of the ALR. The next pressure here is the cost of farmland, which unfortunately just continues to rise and rise. Average cultivated land in BC increased by 8% in 2022, and this was followed by or preceded by an 18.1% increase in 2021. You might not be surprised to hear agricultural land values in BC are the highest in Canada. The South Coast, for instance, ranges from, the average is $139,000 per acre, by far and away the highest priced agricultural land in the country. And to give you a comparison, Ontario ranges from a low of 4,000 to a high of 28,000. So not even in the same ballpark here. Interesting, the Kootenay saw the largest increase, which is 33%, which is a huge jump for that reason. And really what it comes down to is an increased demand and a limited supply that's contributing to these higher values. Farmland near urban areas, especially, is seeing a huge competition between things like hobby farming, rural residential lifestyles, and investment properties as well. The third pressure here, urbanization. I mean, as most people are likely aware, I think one of the councillors mentioned it earlier, BC is a great place to live. With the exorbitant costs of living, some people are getting driven out of the province and moving elsewhere, but on the whole, our population is growing and really showing no signs of slowing down. One of the issues with urbanization, as you well know as a local government, it does put a lot more strain on urban infrastructure. So more people just mean, more sewers, more water, more power, so on and so forth. And there's really these three high growth regions in the province: Lower Mainland, Okanagan, and Southern Vancouver Island. And in and of itself, there's no real problem with that. But from a farming perspective, this is a huge problem, because these areas generate 80% of the farming income in this province. And so here is a map kind of showing that. There's Cathet Regional District and Sunshine Coast Regional District, right directly adjacent to Metro Van, of course. And those 7 regional districts highlighted in yellow, again, that's 80% of where our farm gate receipts are generated, and that has 77% of the population. So lots of people in a reasonably small area where all the best farmland is. And associated with urbanization, of course, is housing demands. I mean, everyone knows it's just like high prices that just keep going higher and higher. And this is the case both to purchase a home and for rentals. BC as well, not surprisingly, is the most unaffordable province for housing. You might have caught a recent news article, the emerging trend of people in BC moving to Alberta. I think that was an immigration outwards for the first time in our province's history. And it's worth noting too that this is not just a Lower Mainland problem anymore. For years and years, prices in the Lower Mainland were blowing up, but the rest of the province was staying reasonably level. Not anymore. 5 or 10 or so years ago, everywhere started to rise. And it's really this ripple effect of people moving out of Vancouver. Vancouverites are moving into secondary cities like Victoria, Nanaimo, Kelowna, and then people in those cities are moving into kind of tertiary cities such as Powell River. And I even caught an article the other day of people in Squamish now all of a sudden flocking to Powell River. And the largest reason for that was Squamish is now unaffordable. So they're moving into your area. So huge housing demands. And really, because of this, more people are looking to the ALR to solve the housing crisis. But, I'm here to tell you that's really not what we should be doing. The first point is it's called the Agricultural Land Reserve, and that's important. When you think about it another way, this is land that is reserved for agriculture. Land that might not be capable of agricultural production today or tomorrow or in 10 years, might be one day with changes in technology and the economy, as well as to our climate. Just because there's a vacant ALR property today doesn't mean it won't be turned into a farm tomorrow. And something to always keep in mind too, it's really the ALR just simply can't be the solution to BC's housing crisis, and nor is the ALR a solution to local government housing planning. I'm not trying to criticize local governments, absolutely far from it. What I'm simply saying is that it's simply too easy and tempting for people to look at an unused piece of ALR land and say, there it is. There's the solution to our housing crisis. Let's just develop that. But that's really not the mindset we should have. As a province and a country, we still have not adopted the build up and out mantra as much as we should. And it's certainly worth noting too that more people in the ALR or in rural areas in general just equals more headaches for everyone. This equals more traffic, people driving farther distances. Often you have people unfamiliar with farming moving into the ALR, and these are the first people to complain about a farmer, conducting normal farm practices. And it also puts that big strain on infrastructure. Many rural areas just simply are not equipped to handle large populations. The fifth pressure here is demographics. Again, I think I've said this 10 times already, but people are probably aware, the average age of a farmer in Canada just keeps on rising. The average age is now 57 in BC. We have the oldest farmers in the country. And this is really not unique to Canada either. This is a trend that's going on in all Western countries. And depressingly, there's fewer young people getting into farming. This is a huge problem and not good. There's tons of reasons for this. The two top of the line would be the lack of affordable farming and simply a lack of interest amongst a lot of young people. And interestingly, BC does have the highest proportion of female farmers in the country. The last pressure I'll talk to is a lack of industrial land. There is a critical shortage of industrial land in Metro Vancouver. You probably caught that in the news, and this has resulted in some just staggering prices. Industrial land is now sitting at $7 million per acre. So you can imagine the pressure there is to convert certain plots of agricultural land into industrial land. Redeveloping industrial land is incredibly profitable for developers and generates a lot of new taxes for local governments. And industrial lands too offer a lot of employment opportunities. There's lots of well-paying jobs in this field. So those are the pressures. Here are some tools in the toolbox, so how local governments can help BC agriculture through land use planning. I'm going to just quickly go over this. There's a lot of information on this, but I think you've been sent the slides too, so you can look afterwards if you like. But through the Local Government Act, you can consider supporting agriculture with things like developing an agricultural advisory committee or an agricultural area plan, having more favorable tax and water rates for farmers. The ministry has also published what we call the Minister's Bylaw Standards. So these are standards that we've developed, and we encourage local governments to adopt these when updating their zoning bylaws with respect to agriculture. These concern everything from property line setbacks to size and siting for residential uses. The Right to Farm Act, it's important to recognize that local government nuisance and animal control bylaws do not have force and effect on properties in the ALR if farmers are following normal farm practices. We also have our agricultural land use inventories. So these are surveys that the ministry has conducted of all agricultural land in a particular area. It's important that local governments to utilize this data when undertaking some of their reporting and planning. Regarding the ALC Act, it's important to acknowledge and support the ALR as a provincial zone where agriculture is a priority use. And within zoning bylaws, important for local governments to be consistent with the ALR regulation. And the ALC also has a whole host of really useful policies and bulletins that really go through and explain the regulation in layman's terms. So I encourage you to poke around and look at those. Nearing the end of my presentation here, just a couple more slides. So really kind of the key messages. First is, yes, this competing demand for limited agricultural land, it's growing. Everyone wants to live in BC's, very limited valley bottoms. The challenges for farmers are growing. The price of land is increasing, encroaching in residential industrial uses. Lots of complaints from urbanites, so lots of challenges facing our farmers. Food security, such a topical issue right now. This goes without saying, but it requires an available land base. If you don't have the land to grow food, well, then you're out of luck. We're not making any more farmland either. It's once it's paved over, it's gone. Protecting this provincial asset does require both a provincial and a local government effort. We're all in this together. It's easy to just say, it's farmland that's just for the ALC to tackle. But, there are many things that local governments can do to support farming in this province. And last slide here, some of the key actions. So you could help BC farmers succeed by reducing some of the burdens within your control. I know I whipped through them, but on that slide a couple slides ago had some things you could do. Creating stronger buffers is one of those, between farmland and other uses. Good fences really do make good neighbors. Coordinating with your local governments, neighbors to enact bylaws impacting agriculture that are consistent, fair, and easy to understand. That benefits everyone. I gave this presentation to Cothat Regional District yesterday, so they've heard the same message. And also recognizing that non-farm uses are having a cumulative impact on the overall ALR land base. So that's it for me. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time there. I'm happy to field any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. I think you missed the buy local button on your last slide, but that's something that we all encourage here in Powell River, especially for all of the markets.
Good one.
We'll,
Yes.
We'll start with Councillor Palm. Do you have a question?
Sorry, are you Mr. Bailey or Mr. Odell?
Mr. Bailey.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Mr. Bailey, I want to thank you for your presentation, first of all, very informative. I guess when I was looking at the presentation, the one thing that jumped out is the increasing number of female farmers in the province. That's very encouraging. But at the same time, can you outline all of the many challenges that these new farmers are facing? That's one thing on your slide.
Yeah, where to start?
Other than the cost of farmland.
Yeah, cost of farmland. I mean, huge. Again, the general lack of interest. Farming is really hard. A lot of people don't want to get into that. It's just a fact of life, and it often takes a really developed skill set to become a farmer. You know, it's often looked at as like unskilled labor, but it's very far from that. So it takes a unique individual to have the gumption and the fortitude to get into farming. And if you think of the hurdles you face, just how many, changing weather, input prices, export, how much you're getting for your product and your crop. There's so many variables that stack up against entering the farming industry when you can, like me, sit behind a computer all day and just click a button. So that's, yeah, I mean, that's just a few to mention it.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Elliott, do you have a question?
Yes, Your Worship, I do. Thank you so much for your presentation. My question has to do with whether the ALC or the minister has considered making policy for allowing lands to opt in and grow the size of the ALR, or whether there could be a net gain policy for trading lands that are of higher agricultural value for ones that are of lower agricultural value with a net gain to the ALR. This could help redistribute agricultural benefits to the higher yielding lands. And so there are other areas we've had no net loss of habitat for certain things, policies that have allowed changes, but also ensure that there's a net gain to the preferred use.
Yeah, so to start off, any landowner whose property is not in the ALR can apply to have their land included into the ALR. So that's an option to anyone that owns fee simple land. Regarding the no net loss policy, that's an interesting one. There was a myth kind of maybe 20 years ago that the ALC did indeed do that, and they don't do that. And there's a reason for this. I think the main reason is developers were getting quite savvy with kind of identifying lands, particularly near urban areas that might have had high agricultural value, and trying to include land, let's say in BC's north, in exchange for that. And it wasn't kind of matching up. The value of the land, particularly near urban areas, from an agricultural perspective, was just so much higher than the land that they were proposing to include. So that policy never really existed, but landowners are free to submit an inclusion and an exclusion application, although they would need support from their local government for the exclusion one. But I don't think there's any interest in actually developing a policy.
Councillor Southcott, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A question and a request. First is the question, how much of the 3.38 billion produced in British Columbia is actually consumed here? And the question is aimed at food security. How self-sufficient are we? And the request is that you send us the detail on slide 13. It's all munched together on the file that's attached to our agenda, so the middle parts of it are quite illegible. And I'd like to review those points, having a particular interest myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I can send around a print version of this so that the slide 13 is broken up into several slides so you can have everything there. Coming back to your original question, I don't know that off the top of my head how much is consumed domestically. I mean, the reality is exporting crops is a huge benefit to farmers too. I absolutely echo your concern about food security. I think the stat on Vancouver Island is, we're down to 4% of what we eat on the island is actually grown on the island, down from 60 odd percent when the ALR was created. So that's something that the ministry is certainly cognizant of, and resources are being devoted to that. But it's a tricky one when you're balancing exports versus domestic consumption.
Councillor Doubt.
Remember you from yesterday. It's a short time ago.
I thought I recognized you, actually. I was like, oh, he was there yesterday. Yeah.
Saw you at the regional district, and
Yeah.
you seem to do a better job of keeping breathing while you were doing it today. I know you were rushed yesterday.
A little more time today, yeah.
Got a question, a couple of questions. The first one is, does your organization provide consultation to municipalities that are reviewing their OCP? Because you talk about a number of bylaws and zoning ideas that would be useful there, and we're going to be updating our OCP in the near future. I think we're starting right now. And do you provide assistance to municipalities in doing that?
That is literally my job. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I do. The main bulk of my job is reviewing any type of planning initiative from an agricultural perspective on behalf of local governments, whether that's OCP, zoning bylaws, ALC applications, development variance permits, whatever it might be. Tons of local governments, Cathet Regional District being an example, will often refer these types of planning initiatives to ministry staff. We put our agricultural lens on it and then send it back to you with some comments and feedback. So absolutely, refer it to me. I'd be glad to have a look.
That's great. And we have maybe more than a lot of other small municipalities, we have a lot of undeveloped agricultural land, reserve land, and agricultural land outside of the ALC within our boundaries. And I think in listening to your presentation that the biggest pressure that might happen in a municipality is trying to remove land from agricultural uses for housing pressure. And I hear you advising you don't think that's a good idea.
I don't.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering about if you could talk a little bit about the process for removing land from the ALC, because you expressed concern about municipalities and not using them for other purposes, but the ALC would have ultimate authority, and so tell me a little bit more about where the authority lies to remove land from the ALC, where the guardrails are, and how that relates to, and I'm wondering also, does that relate to the cost of farmland increasing? For example, the speculation that stuff will get removed or urban containment boundaries will be expanded, and so there's just speculation that things are going in that direction. Can you tell me a little bit more about that process?
Sure. Yeah, your first one. So the exclusion process changed a couple years back. Prior to this change, individual landowners, if they wanted their property excluded from the ALR, could submit an application to the ALC, much like a subdivision application. That authority was removed a few years back. Now, property can only be excluded from the ALR if the local government actually champions the application. So if you were approached by a landowner that says, hey, I'd like to get my property out of the ALR, the idea is then that the local government undertakes a thoughtful review, if you will, and looks at where this property sits within their zoning bylaw and their OCP and decides whether, yes, maybe this is a good decision on behalf of this landowner, or no, we're not going to do that. So it really is the local government that has to get behind that application. And the second part, it's land speculating in the ALR has been going on forever, and it's only getting worse, to be completely honest. We're seeing lands, particularly close to urban areas, simply just being held on that belief that maybe one day it will be excluded. Exclusions are happening fewer and fewer. The boundaries of the ALR are pretty hard for the most part, and there's not much wiggle room. So we'd like to think that speculators aren't going to get their payday one day, but holding ALR land is a problem, one that we're aware of, but it's tough to tackle in kind of a free market system.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. I've actually, I guess, more so got a question for our Director of Planning here. I was just looking at the zoning map during Mr. Bailey's presentation, and I guess I wasn't too sure. 2 properties. You could just clarify, and maybe some of the members of the public would appreciate knowing how much or what percentage roughly of ALR do we have that's actually in city limits, or is it the A1 or A2 properties?
Through the chair to Councilor Almeida, I think it's probably better to consider the land use designation map in the official community plan as a better resource. Even that, though, doesn't dictate, doesn't differentiate between ALR and lands that have a land use designation of agriculture. I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but I can tell you some of the larger parcels, one of them owned by the city beside Brooks School, is a large parcel in the ALR. The parcel around Valentine Mountain, owned by Mosaic, is a large parcel of ALR. And then there's lands, again, in Wildwood that are part of the ALR. Those are, for the most part, those are the holdings. They are large parcels with a few small parcels sprinkled in, but that's...
Mr. Bailey, thank you very much. We have your contact information, so I'm sure that we'll get back to you and seek your advice and wisdom. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. All the best.
We'll now move to 4.2, which is Mr. Murray regarding Block Party Day Initiative.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you again. First off, I'd like to, one thing that people haven't mentioned yet today is that today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the D-Day. I'm representing the Westview ratepayers today, and at our last general meeting, we had a resolution to have me come and talk and present a proposal on what we're an initiative that we're going to be doing, which is called block parties, and having a block party day, which is going to be Sunday, July 7th. And the idea is that we've heard so much over this past many months that there's a lot of division in town and a lot of hostilities and stuff like that, and people got their backs up, and it's been mentioned a number of times that what it's not just council's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility to help out. And so we thought, what can we do? Well, we've got 2 initiatives going, and the one that I'm going to talk about today is the block parties, because they're fun. They bring people together from all over, from your neighborhood, from your block. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're larger. The first one that was party to was 25 years ago when I first moved to our home on Manitoba Avenue. And at that time, we were the young kids on the block. And most of the people there had been, they built the houses, they raised their families. The kids went to Gordon Park and then off to Max and Brooks. And they grew up and they moved away, and we were the youngest kids on the block. And it was all the old, all the seniors. And so what they did the very first summer that we were there is they had a reunion. They hadn't had one in years, but they had a reunion and invited people, the kids back, and the families who used to live on the street back to Manitoba Avenue for a weekend party. And we happened to be the first move-in people in a long time, and they invited us. And it was so much fun to get to know these people who grew up there, that raised their families there, got to meet the people who built our house and got the stories about how the house was built and how they came upon building it. And I got to meet the people who grew up. Some of them moved out of town and came back just for the weekend. Some lived down the street. Another family, they had raised their, I used to hear this story a lot. Back when we were raising our family, we had 72 kids in this block. Now there's none. Well, thankfully, now that we put Brooks, our Westview School in, we've got kids coming back and raising their families there. So it's really changed the dynamics. So with the block parties, it brought everybody together. And so that was kind of a reunion block party. A few years later, we did one just for ourselves at our end of the block. We called it our end of the block party. And we got just everybody together and had a beautiful barbecue and a picnic and enjoyed the evening and had some music, and everybody just had a good time. It was a good way of getting to know people and building some friendships and helping basically just getting to know each other. And we've done that a few times over the years. And so we were talking about this at the ratepayers, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun to promote block parties and to actually have a day where we actually have one big day for block parties throughout town? Now, they don't have to be big. They don't have to be the entire block. They don't have to be the entire neighborhood. They can just be a few houses around you to bring people together to talk and to chat. And these last few years, people have been driven apart for many reasons, since the last 4 years especially. So any way we can bring people together is a good idea. And so we're here to encourage people to have a block party, get to know your neighbors again. I know there's been a lot of people moved from out of town, new people to town, people moved around town, people have passed away, unfortunately. So there's a lot of new people in the area. So it's a good way of just bringing people together and getting them talking and helping each other out. And so I did create a flyer that can be distributed around. And one of the things that we'd like to do is, as part of the ratepayers, is help people put their parties on if they want. We're not going to come out and actually grill or anything like that. But we will help you, let you know what you need, like if you need tables or chairs or what kind of food to get or how to get your friends or your neighbors to help you. It's to... I spent 20 years in hotels and restaurants, so and mainly in the catering division, and I've literally put on thousands of parties, from elegant 2-person corporate takeover dinners to 2,000-person weddings, and there's a huge variety of parties that can happen, and we would like to help. Just help people figure out what they need to do for a party. It doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be expensive. It sure can be, but it doesn't have to be. And the best parties are usually the potlucks that everybody just kind of pitches in and helps out and cleans up. So we've asked for the day, Sunday, July 7th, to be proclaimed as Block Party Day in Paul River. And I'm happy to see that the mayor is going to be doing that tonight. And so if anybody in town or the area wants to put on a block party and needs help, they're welcome to call me. My contact information is on the flyer. Maybe it was redacted, but I'll give it to you. Or contact Rick Craig. So if anybody has any, we just want to help bring people together is what we want to do, and help people have a good time. So thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. We'll start with Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions on my part, but Mr. Murray, I want to appreciate and thank you for bringing this up. I remember as a kid in the eastern part of Toronto, a resident on our street also had the initiative to do a block party, and I think even now, probably almost 40 years later, my dad's still on that block, and they do a corn roast every year. We used to do fireworks on Victoria Day weekend and things. The level has maybe come down a little bit over the years, but it used to always be a great way. And even in the neighborhood I lived in Burnaby, they did a couple of block parties, and we enjoyed them so much. Even when we moved away, they invited us to come back a couple of times. So I've been having this on my mind for several years, and since moving to Powell River, and appreciate you taking the initiative to get things going. And I'm happy to participate where I can to make something a reality.
Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to staff, I know that we've previously had block party funding available, but there was maybe an issue with insurance and the block party trailer. I'm wondering if you just update what the status is of that, if we found an insurance solution, and if there's any way to provide block party funding without the trailer. What options do we have for supporting block parties in the city?
Through the chair, we are continuingly actively searching for solutions still at this point. We are finding that our insurance provider overall as a municipality does require us to have insurance if we are supporting parties. That insurance is proving to be more and more costly over the years. When we first started these, we could hold upwards of 20 parties a year with our $5,000. Now it would be definitely under 10 with our $5,000. We could and are trying to search for other creative solutions now. We actually see this opportunity on July 7th to see how this works as a massive opportunity to inform future decisions on how we could support things at a completely different level than we have in the past.
One thought is, as an example, Vancouver Foundation, through their neighborhood small grants programs, gives a chunk of money to neighborhood houses, and then those distribute grants directly, and so the insurance doesn't. So it's like a granting to then grant further on. So I'm offering that as a potential solution to explore with a community foundation, for example.
Through the chair, one thing we did try to do is have homeowners get their own insurance, because it would be similar to that, and then be able to refund. The insurance that the homeowners can get is actually even more expensive than the insurance that we can get to provide, and the limitations when we provide it are very specific. No alcohol, no bouncy castles, and the list goes on and on and on and on. We are unsure of what the restrictions would be when the homeowners get their own insurance, but that would be on the homeowners' responsibility at that point.
Councillor Dote.
Good idea. Okay, and as Councillor Isaacson pointed out, we've had a block party program that was run by Parks and Recreation for a while. Townsite Ratepayers Society, I think it is, or the association, that keep getting them mixed up, has had a block party for the last couple of years. Downtown Townsite, and they've had it in association with their neighborhood garage sale, which has been pretty successful. I think they're running into the same question about insurance, and I think they're a great idea, sorting out how you get them insured and how you do it properly, because I don't want to see you as a homeowner set up a party, have a party there, and end up with $1 million liability because an accident happens and there's no insurance. But I like the block party idea, and just publicizing it and saying we're going to all try to have them on a similar date. Sounds like a great idea. If the city is going to put money into it and have a budget, I think we need to spend some time thinking about exactly how we do that before we start making any financial decisions.
Councillor Southcott.
My questions have already been asked. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Elliott.
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Palm.
Thank you, Worship. Just to clarify for this endeavor, we still have our trailer, and is it available for pickup?
Through the chair, we definitely still have our trailer. We do not have it insured at this point. That minor formality that we would need to do. It does have the capacity for one party at a time, and we would just have to check its supplies and make sure everything is updated. That's going part and parcel with our planning of what we would need to do to update and reinvigorate the whole program.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray.
Thank you.
Now move to correspondence, and I'll start with the two proclamations. The first one is the proclamation for Block Party Day. So whereas community spirit and neighborly bonds are essential for fostering a sense of belonging and unity within our neighborhoods, and whereas the tradition of block parties has long been recognized as a means to strengthen those ties and to promote camaraderie among residents. Whereas the residents of Powell River, BC embody the spirit of togetherness and demonstrate a commitment to creating vibrant and inclusive communities. Whereas block parties provide an opportunity for neighbors to come together, share laughter, build friendships, and celebrate the unique character of our neighborhoods. Now, therefore, I, Ron Wasno, Mayor of the City of Powell River, do hereby proclaim Sunday, July 7th, 2024, as Neighborhood Block Party Day in the City of Powell River, BC. And we'll move to the 5.2, which is a proclamation for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And this is quite important for me, having chaired the Community Response Network and the Seniors Association. So whereas Powell River seniors are valued members of society, convey a wealth of experience and wisdom in our community, and deserve to live with dignity and respect, it is our collective responsibility to ensure they live safely and fully in a community that cares about them. Whereas victims of elder abuse are parents, grandparents, neighbors, and friends. Elder abuse is not limited by race, gender, culture, and circumstance. And whether physical, emotional, or financial, elder abuse takes an unacceptable toll on individuals and families. Whereas seniors who experience abuse or neglect face a heightened risk of health-related complications. Financial abuse can rob our seniors of their security that they have built over a lifetime. Tragically, many older adults suffer in silence, burdened by fear, shame, or impairments that prevent them from speaking out about abuse. Whereas combating abuse of older adults will help improve the quality of life for all seniors in our community and allow seniors to continue to live as independently as possible and contribute to the life and vibrancy of Powell River. Whereas Powell River seniors are guaranteed that they will be treated with respect and dignity to enable them to continue to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important and active members of this community. Whereas the well-being of Powell River seniors is in the interest of all and further adds to the well-being of Powell River. I, Ron Wasno, Mayor of Powell River, do hereby proclaim June 15th, 2024 as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and encourage all residents to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of our seniors. We'll now move to committee reports. The Committee of the Whole meeting held May 14th, 2024. Yes, Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. I was the chair of that meeting, so I'll just quickly review. Of course, the minutes are in the agenda package and everyone can watch the meeting online as well. Just a couple of quick highlights from the meeting. We had a presentation from the Cassette Regional Cycling Association to promote Go By Bike Week, which is the week that we're currently in right now, as Councillor Isaacson talked about earlier today. We also had a letter that Councillor Isaacson mentioned that came from the Ministry of Mental Health. A few months ago, the city had requested to the ministry to get funding for a peer-assisted care team called a PACT team. At the time, we were under the impression that the ministry was looking to expand the program, and they responded to let us know that they had decided to pull back on expansion just yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that for later on. And then our Director of Infrastructure also gave us an airport runway update at the time, which now a couple weeks later, we are nearing the end of completion. So everything else you can catch on the web.
Any other comments on that meeting? Okay, we'll move to 6.2, which is the Standing Committee on City-Owned Land Utilization meeting held April the 22nd, 2024. And in the document that is in the agenda package, there were two recommendations coming out of the meeting on April 22nd. And the reason for the committee looking at these properties is twofold. One, it is an opportunity to generate revenue for the city. So currently we have about 160 city-owned properties that generate no revenue and add to the expense of maintaining and keeping those properties. So when our committee looked at this, we looked at what the consultants had suggested with regard to these two properties. We all went out and did a walking tour of the two properties. And in the end, we decided these two motions would add significant value long-term to the city, both in terms of creating housing and also for generating revenue for the city. So 7.1, that has to do with property 23 on Ontario Street. Currently, that property is all designated as agricultural land. So it's not in the agricultural land reserve, but within our official community plan, it has that designation.
Point of information, Mayor. Are you on to item 7.1 or are you still on item 6.2?
I'm on 7.1.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the confusion. So when we looked at that property, L. Austin and John Spick, who have considerable experience in developing properties and the engineering and architectural design that goes into them, suggested that that property is ideally set up to have two classifications. So the area which is directly across from the housing development could simply be designated for 17 lots, and then the remaining land could stay as agricultural. For those of you who have walked any of the trails, it's right next to the Penticton trails, and it's an ideal location for families, the opportunity for young people to explore in their backyards the nature aspects. So what we're saying is the first step would have to be later this year, when we're looking at the official community plan, would be to consider designating the lower portion of that property 23 in order to allow a subsequent discussion on whether that should be developed for housing. So I'll open up if there are any questions with regard to our recommendation. We'll start with Councillor Thom.
No, Your Worship, I was a member of this committee, so I'm ready to make the recommendation when.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have just a couple of thoughts on this recommendation. First of all, I think it would be good to refer it to the Select Committee on City-Owned Properties, which also is looking at this same package of properties. And I would prefer to have it referred to our Committee of the Whole, where council members can have the opportunity to have a fulsome report with the information around these particular recommendations for their own learning and benefit prior to making decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
No questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Doat.
I prefer to save my thoughts until we have a motion on the floor that we can debate.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, if we're in questions right now, the recommendation number one, through the chair to staff, I'm wondering about the official community planning process and where this type of review might normally fit within an official community planning process. Because normally changing an official community plan requires substantial community engagement. And so if you could talk about that process, and that would be something that if this were referred to committee of the whole, I would like more staff information on.
Through the chair to Councillor Isaacson. Yeah, the way this recommendation is worded, it's not as clear. Quite frankly, if we're in the middle of an official community plan process, this would be part of a recommendation coming back to council about all land use designations. It's not its own amendment, standalone amendment that if it was, tomorrow come back with a report to council so that we can understand the pros and cons with this, it would be a standalone piece. But the way this is worded, it seems like it's embedded in the larger process. So it would fall into the time, as we're looking at all the land use designations throughout our community, it would be a report to council about adopting a bylaw that essentially is the official community plan. I mean, multiple times back to council will be coming with different recommendations as it relates to the land use designations of our community. So,
okay,
my take is that if the interest is to have this one stand out, it should be its own initiative. If it's to be part of the larger process, it will be part of endless community engagement and communication with council through that process.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarity, to make sure I'm understanding the wording of the motion, you're referring to, I know the property you're referring to up in the Penticton Trails, and when you're referring to the west side of the property, so we're talking about Ontario Street, where there's a half a dozen homes on the north end, and then an empty side on that side. You're focused on the 17, so we're not rezoning the entire thing, but that one section to make two consistent rows of, or two consistent sides of homes on both sides of Ontario. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to put a motion on the floor that councillor directs staff to change the official community plan designation of property 23 identified in the 2021 land management strategy as future Nootka neighborhood in multiple phases, starting with making the west side of the property consistent with the neighborhood properties to the west when the city's official community plan is updated. Seconder, we have seconded, and discussion. Councillor Doat.
Okay. I was going to wait and see if others spoke, but I like to read the motion, think about what the motion says before I vote on it. And this one is particularly clear. And it says that council directs staff to change the official community plan designation for property 23, etc. That's not a request to write a report on changing it. It's not a request to think about changing it or to get public consultation. It says it's a motion to change the official community plan. Frankly, I'm not comfortable with doing that without a detailed staff report on exactly what we would be doing and a look into and an opportunity for the public to have a consultation on those, because I know there's considerable public interest in what happens to the Penticton Trails property and the recreational values that go on there. So I think the public deserves an opportunity. We don't have to pass this motion to have that conversation happen during the official community plan. we could accept the suggestion that Councillor Elliott has made, that we could refer this to the Committee on City-Owned Properties to look into and provide input and perhaps work with staff to create a report on it. But as the motion stands right now, I don't think it's an appropriate thing to do. I don't want to direct staff to change the OCP, and I think the public deserves more input.
Thank you, Councillor Doudt. I would ask Mr. Gao, since you were involved when we drafted this, is this a matter of changing the words to make it clear that we expected that there would have been public participation during the OCP process? And the wording here, I agree with Councillor Doudt, is too definitive. So your comments, please.
Through the chair, to your worship, I come from a position that if council wishes to consider changing an official community plan, that involves community engagement and involves early and ongoing engagement. It's why we have Section 475 of the Local Government Act, to ensure that there is the public participation process. It's not a matter of switching a land use designation. Perhaps I'm incorrect, but I take the position that my role is to come back with a report that lays out the pros and cons and explains those things, and that would be part of a broader official community planning process. It's not as cut and dry as just changing a land use designation in an official community plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gao. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Mayor. I read this recommendation as having an implicit assumption. At least that's the way I originally read it, and I read it a few times. And that is the last half of the last line, when the city's official community plan is updated. I'm quoting the last half of the last line there. Until this moment, I've assumed that implied the OCP rewrite that is, to my understanding, is planned for this year and next year. I think that it is, so there is a question in my mind now as to whether the recommendation is, we understand it, to then direct staff to deviate from the work that they're doing on the rewrite or leading up to that to address this recommendation as a standalone or on its own. And I guess before I can eliminate other reservations I have as well, I really need to understand whether that is the intent. Apologize for not understanding that before this moment.
Not at all, Councillor Southcott. I can assure you that the committee wished this to become part of the official community plan review and not as a standalone ask of staff.
Okay, if I may continue. Though I do have reservations with, in a very broad way, and I'll itemize one of those right now, and that is that the zoning, R1 and R2 zoning, single residential zoning, is across the continent now falling out of favor as we collectively understand the unsustainability of it. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to expect that in a rewrite of the OCP, we will simply duplicate the designation of that land right across Ontario from the way it was developed in the previous generation or so. The planning department's value analysis mapping tool makes it very clear exactly how the development pretty much over most of Westview is unsustainable, and that also constitutes a reservation So my fundamental reservation is that we don't use the precious resource of our planning department to deviate that resource from the larger work of the rewrite of the OCP.
Thank you, Councillor Thom.
Thank you, Worship. Interesting discussions all around. We're talking about land. There's always reservations. We have 150 parcels of land in the city. And we have another committee that's looking at those and deciding what to do on many fronts. The mayor put this committee forward to try to cherry pick a couple of the properties that make sense as low-hanging fruit for two reasons. One, we have a housing problem in our city where developers are running out of land and running out of places to build. Secondly, we have a financial conundrum in the city of Powell River, which we need to address. So because of those two reasons, the mayor is being proactive to try to deal and help both of those situations out. So I'm fully supportive of getting the ball rolling on these two pieces of property, that recommendation 1 and recommendation 2, to see if we can get the ball rolling, because even though this falls on our planning department, it's hoped that we can get the process in place by dealing with these two pieces of property and rewriting our OCP so that eventually down the road, we can have a Department of Land Management that can help out our planning department, which would require additional funding. So with the sale or lease of properties, we would be able to look at that. So this is a very reasonable request, because those 150 that are tied up with the other committee don't seem to be moving very fast. So I fully support these recommendations. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Dowd.
I'm going to propose an amendment to the motion. And the amendment would be that council directs staff to consider changes to the official community plan, etc. Okay, so, and the change would be direct staff to consider changes to the official community plan. That way, we would be doing what I think the mayor is asking us to do, and what Councillor Southcott thinks will happen, and what I think is the appropriate thing to happen, is that when we have the official community plan discussion, staff will bring up the properties at property 23, along with all the other properties in the city that would be considering at the same time. We will look at the possible changes that are suggested in this recommendation, get public input, and at the time that the OCP is renewed, there may be changes. There may not, but there may be, depending on the public consultation. That's why I'm proposing this amendment. I think it makes it more clear. And if that amendment was to pass, I'd be in favor of the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dowd, for an excellent amendment. I will second the amendment. Do we have Councillor Elliott beat me to it? She believes seconded it. Any further? Yes, Councillor Elliott.
Sorry, thank you. I've had my little yellow hand up for a while, and it seems I was passed by. But so my comfort level with approving the recommendation isn't to do with whether I think the recommendation is a good recommendation or not. It's to do with the lack of staff report to go along with the recommendations. And my inclination, as I said before, would be to put it to committee of the whole to give council the ability to ask questions, learn more about the impacts of what this motion would do prior to having it before council for decision. And I would move to refer, if I could, the recommendations, both recommendations, to the Select Committee on City-Owned Lands, just to receive input from that committee, who has agreed to look at these lands as well.
I'm going to ask the CO. We have an amended motion on the floor. We have another suggestion from Councillor Elliott. Do we deal with the amended motion on the floor first?
Mayor, if the motion is to refer the motions on the floor, the motion to refer can interrupt the motions on the floor, and then everything on the floor would just be referred to the meeting Councillor Elliott's proposing. This referral motion would not be debated, it would just be voted on.
Okay, there's a referral motion on the floor. No discussion is required. All in favor?
Sorry, Your Worship, there wasn't a seconder for that one that I saw.
Did we have a seconder? Seconder by Councillor Almeida. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the deferment amendment is passed. So we'll
Not
move now-
deferred, it's referred.
I'm sorry, Councillor Elliott, you said something?
Oh, I just wanted to make the point that it is referred, not deferred. Deferred is
Oh.
different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll now move to the second recommendation from the Standing Committee. And again, the committee had an opportunity to go to the site, and part of the information that led to our decision was that it's land which is in close proximity to two similar blocks of housing. And we could see no way that it would impact the communities to continue to complete the development of that neighborhood. So I'll read the motion that council directs staff to determine that servicing is possible and identify service routes, location, and capacity of current servicing for property 24, identified in the 2021 land management strategy as future Tofino neighborhood, and subsequently prepare a tender document for the sale or lease of the property. We have a seconder we will discuss. Seconded by Councillor Thom. We'll open for discussion with Councillor Almeida.
I guess I have a question, since this is my first time in an OCP process. So I'll direct my question to our planning team and CAO who have been through this before. In an OCP process, if council does...
Councillor, I just want to interrupt. There is no OCP involved in this property.
Okay,
that was only for the first.
Correct. Sorry. Yep. My apologies. Then I will. I have no question at this point. Maybe down the road.
Okay. Councillor Isaacson.
Question, and I'm not sure who to direct this to. There's through the chair to whoever might be able to answer. My understanding there's like an electrical wires and a substation on or beside that property. I'm wondering if someone could speak more to the realities of that situated on the property.
Mr. Gao?
Through the chair to Councillor Isaacson, you are correct. There is a statutory right-of-way for power lines as well as a substation as part of that property. In terms of the reality of developing it, it would be development outside of that statutory right-of-way. There are other adjacent residential buildings in the vicinity, so it can be done. I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, but
just yeah.
Just for the planning department, I don't have a clue about the answer, so maybe I shouldn't be asking the question. But the question is it normal when a developer buys a piece of property for the city to do a study to find the ways to provide the services and to bear the cost of doing that study, or would the planning department normally require the developer to do that?
through the chair to Councillor Dowd, consider the fact that the city is potentially the seller of lands. And I think the question is, what are we selling? What is the value of it? And the value is going to be determined by how close services are, what the cost to develop those services are. And so if the city's interest is to go out and sell those lands, it would best understand those hard costs associated with infrastructure to understand what is a realistic value to sell the land for. But if I may, to your question, typically if we're dealing with private land, it would be the developer's responsibility to model, to understand what those works and services are going to be, which works and services will be required.
Thank you.
Councillor Southcott.
No questions, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Elliott, do you have any questions?
Yes. So normally, whoever owns the land has to request a works and services to get that information. You're not required to have one to sell it, but it's usually helpful. Sometimes people make their purchase offers subject to such a thing. They go out of date really fast, and usually the landowner has to pay for another one anyways. Is a works and services what we're asking for here, or is this something different? What does this mean? Determining services is possible. Is that like an expensive study? There's no money attached to this, so I don't know what the implications of this decision are at all.
Councillor Gao. Sorry.
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott. This is a much more comprehensive process. So a works and services review is essentially a review of our city bylaws that is done in-house for $200. That is just a service we provide for single-family residential properties and such. When somebody's looking at developing, in this case, a much more expansive area of land, they're looking at modeling. So we're actually looking to our third-party consultants and looking at, infrastructure related to water, sanitary, storm, looking at where those pipes are in our community, how far they are away from the land that's, in this case, looking to be developed. What's the capacity of those pipes? And so it's a much more comprehensive process and quite a bit more expensive. I also note that there is no dollar associated with this recommendation, but I sure hope that there's a willingness to put some money towards the cost of doing this modeling, because as I said, it is a third-party consultant that the city works for, and so it would cost some money.
I just comment that before the standing committee put this on, we did a review of real estate departments in other cities. And this is a norm in terms of what other cities have followed. So you had a follow-up, Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I would like to move a amendment to the motion that council directs staff to write a report to inform council how to do all of this and what it costs with budgets and so forth. And I don't have the exact wording, but my intention is that we get a report that that better informs us about what this recommendation implementation costs and the process that it follows, so that we can be better informed before making a decision.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. Any discussion on the Councillor Doubt?
Yeah, I'd like to hear staff read that motion back so we have some idea what we're deciding on. Because I'm not clear. Councillor Elliott said a few different things.
Through the chair, from what I understand, the amendment to the motion would be that staff be directed to return to council with a report with information about the rest of the motion. So it's a little funny because it's almost a new motion. But I see that the timing would this should, yeah. I think the wording would be that staff return to council with a report that informs council of the information included in the original motion. I'd have to play with that wording a little bit.
I make a comment.
Doubt.
Oh, and I hear what Councillor Elliott's trying to do, and I'm going to suggest maybe we should defeat Councillor Elliott's motion and make a brand new motion to refer recommendation number 2 to the planning department staff for a report on the cost of the various items contained in recommendation number 2.
I would concur with George's or Councillor Doubt's recommendation for process.
Okay, we have, yes, Councillor
I
Southcott.
have a question with regard to the new the new motion, if I may.
Yes, but we would need a seconder before we
Do
discuss.
we have a seconder on that?
Councillor Almeida, all right? Councillor Southcott.
Thank you. With respect to the reservation that I expressed to recommendation 1, I'm not in favor of tying up our planning department on work that I have personal doubts are going to really benefit our city. So my question is, how much work would it involve to answer the question that is posed by this amendment or this new motion? Like, I'm thinking in terms of hours, and like, is this a big project or could this be done?
Through the chair to Councillor Southcott, I think there's 2 ways to approach this. There's one where it's a very brief report. I could very quickly get costs associated with modeling. The bigger question is, what are we modeling? And that's where I think we get into a question about what is it that we're planning for? Is it single family residential? Is it something broader? And so that hasn't actually been, there's no direction there. And I think that would, it could involve a bigger conversation, but perhaps an initial report that highlights initial costs and raises the question that maybe we could get some more direction from council in terms of what it is that we're modeling for. We may be able to work with a third-party consultant to get some thresholds, so 25 units, 50 units, what is it that we're looking for, just to kind of get a sense as to what possibly could happen there.
The committee put forward the recommendation based on what exists in that community now. So it was simply an extension of the neighborhood, which are single-family housing. So would you be able to answer that question that Councillor Southcott has raised with that clarification?
Again, I think that would be through the chair to the mayor, your worship. I think in that case, it would be a little bit more straightforward. The parcel is a bit unique, and that's something that the committee discussed because of some topography and access. The question I would have is then, are we getting a surveyor involved to help us with a potential conceptual layout? But I think we could keep it quite high level, just give you some of the costs associated with the modeling for you to make a more informed decision on.
You give us your guesstimate of what the cost would be?
Through the chair, I can tell you that our third-party consultants typically charge $5,000 per service. It may be a little different when we're working with a third party that works for us, ideally a little less, but and I think I would be in a place where I'd be recommending the use of a land surveyor to at least address some of the complexity of that particular site, because it's really easy to look at those lots immediately off Tofino and imagine single family, but then there's a bulk of land left in behind that you'd have to be quite strategic in terms of how you develop it, not to just leave it vacant. So there may be some additional costs there, but if we're looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to kind of have the information so that a buyer could look at it and say, does this make sense? Am I going to have to extend a water main a kilometer to accommodate this development? That's a big, that's a big cost, and that might be an immediate reason why somebody wouldn't look to purchase it.
That cost in mind, the other thing that the committee considered, and this was based on probably 60 years of experience with the planner and the architecture and the design people, is that probably a reasonable figure for that land would be, say, 20 times 100,000. So just to put into perspective for council, the rate of return that you would get if you invested, say, $20,000 in this. And that would, of course, exclude the ongoing revenue each year from taxation of the houses that were there. Councillor Isaacson.
I guess kind of a point of information. So right now we have an amendment on the floor that's been seconded, and I believe Councillor Doubt recommended, because it was almost like a new motion, that we vote it down and then consider the main motion. And if we do want a report from staff, that may be a subsequent motion, because it is different from the original intent of the motion. And so I just wanted to affirm if that's your understanding of where we're at.
Yes, and I'm going to ask the CEO to read the motion that's on the floor.
Through the chair, from what I understood is that Councillor Doubt made the motion to refer the motions to staff. So we're just referring those motions that are on the floor back to staff to come back with a report. With all of the motions being made, I think that might be the easiest way procedurally to move forward.
Councillor Isaacson.
Then I do have some commentary. If staff were to provide a report, when I think about what I want staff to be spending time on, given the variety of priorities that they have, I would be looking for a land use that aligns with our housing needs assessment, and single family homes are not going to meet our housing needs assessment, and what that money would be used for. So if we had a housing authority where we had a plan to build multifamily housing, then I would feel like this would be moving in a direction that I'd want, but it's not there yet. And so I don't, unless there was direction to have this motion include the reference to meeting our housing needs assessment and what the possible uses for those funds might be. I don't think that staff should be spending time on this yet. So I don't not support it in completely, but not as it is currently. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask our corporate officer to read what is on the floor now.
Mayor, the motion on the floor is to refer the current motions on the floor to staff to return with a report explaining costs and benefits of the motions.
So Southcott?
I think Councillor Elliott actually had her hand up before I did.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I share concerns with some of my colleagues with the additional information that we were trying to narrow it to single family home neighborhood similar to what is already there. I have concerns that doesn't meet the needs of working families to have homes that they can afford. And so I'm in favor of referring it, and I'd like the staff report that comes out to have options that would better meet our housing needs than just the single family option.
So in answer to your question, the committee discussed this in detail. So what you have is none of the city properties have ever been developed. Every recommendation brought forward to develop city-owned properties has been put aside for a number of different reasons. When the committee looked at the experience around the table, individuals who had developed, worked with developers, it became very clear that one can base decisions on planning studies that were done a number of years ago, or you can base a decision on what people who've actually built properties in Powell River and contributed to Powell River's housing have done. We opted to say we will put more weight on those experienced people in Powell River that believe this was an opportunity to develop that property. If not, we will likely be sitting here in October of 2026 and not a single thing had been done with city-owned properties. So a planning study is only as good as it reflects the input from people who are on the ground and have actually built and done things. So is there any other questions before we move the motion? Okay. I'll move the motion. All in favor? Oh, yes.
You said questions. I have debate to offer. I have comments.
Good. Okay, so we'll move now to comments on the motion. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you. So to reiterate concerns from my concerns for recommendation 1, I think that this, yes, I do respect that this property is probably one of the more developable of the many city-owned properties, of which 25 were selected as having some potential for development in various different possibilities. I also respect Director Gao's comment that this property is complex. My view is that, as I stated before with recommendation 1, that our priority is to reassess our OCP as a whole. I think since it was written 10 years ago, it needs a complete rewrite. There's been an awful lot of, particularly on my part, advancement in understanding, but across the whole continent, really, with post-war World War II development, R1 is no longer sustainable, and it isn't what we need anymore. Further to that, developers are very capable, and this is already zoned and has the land use designation that would make it easily accessible for developers if developers wanted to develop this. Yes, we could invest in staff time to see to try to make it more attractive, but I can't support that because I do support the higher priority as I stated it, and as I stated before as well. What I really do value is the preciousness of our staff time. If we get them doing stuff like this, then we are going to distract them from work that I believe is much more important. So I can't support either the motion to refer this for a specific report or actually the recommendation itself. I just think the whole situation down there is way too complex, and I didn't get the impression from the developers who consulted with us that they would disagree with my view. Thank you.
Mr. Gao, for clarification, how much time would it take yourself or one of your staff members to hire a consultant to do the study you outlined?
Through the chair to your worship, the process of working with our consultants, GeoAdvice, that is a pretty quick request from our end. It doesn't take a lot of time for us to say, this is the piece of land, these are the number of units, tell us what the servicing capabilities are. So that's a pretty quick process.
So is it reasonable to say there might be 8 hours of your time or one of your staff's time?
It's reasonable.
Councillor Doubt.
I just want to explain why I made this referral. And the reason I did it is so that we would have a professional report from our staff about the costs of the items in recommendation number 2. I'd like to have that information, but I also hear what Councillor Elliott, and Councillor Isaacson, and Councillor Southcott, and Councillor Alameda are talking about how much we need single-family homes. And I don't think we need very many of them. So the reason I moved the referral was to get more information to see if there might be some reason to be in favor of this recommendation at some time. But, you know, council will decide in the majority whether it wants to do the referral or go to talking about whether we pass recommendation number 2 or not.
Thank you, Councillor Doubt. With regard to your comment, we did survey real estate agents in Powell River, all of which says there is a shortage of single-family housing and that they get a number of people that would like to move here from Squamish and other areas and are limited by the lack of single-family housing. So we have a motion on the floor. Just one final time, I'll ask our CO to read it and then we will vote.
Chair, the motion is to refer the motions on the floor to staff to report back to council.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? We have 2 opposed and the majority have passed the motion. Thank you. We'll now move to 7.2, which is Select Committee Terms of Reference Amendment. Yes, Councillor Isaacson.
I move that council amend. Distracted by the.
Just read.
I move that council amend the terms of reference for the Select Committee on City-Owned Properties to replace 6 to 8 with 5 to 8 members of the public.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. And Councillor Elliott, were you seconded or do you have a question?
Oh, I wanted to speak to the motion because I'm the chair of that committee and I wanted to explain why the motion's on the agenda.
Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we had some resignations on our committee, and so the select committee discussed whether we would like to advertise and fill those positions or whether we would recommend to council to change the terms of reference to make the committee just include the people that are currently left. And we decided the second option was probably better given that we were a year in and we had done a lot of learning between the beginning and now, and adding extra people might not be the most efficient way to work on that committee. And so we are here before council to ask that we change the terms of reference to reflect the current membership on the committee.
Do we have any further questions? I will call the motion. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to 8, which is reports for decision. 8.1, TC Pub. Dr. Gao.
Good evening, Council. So the purpose of the report before you is to obtain direction on a referral from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for an amendment to an existing liquor primary license for a proposed 22-person outdoor patio. Although the authority to regulate liquor service rests with the province, the LCRB refers certain types of applications to local governments for comments. The applicant is TC's Pub, located at Town Center Hotel on Joyce Avenue. Key to note is that there is no proposed change to the occupancy load associated with their application. The intent is to just seat fewer patrons inside while the outdoor patio is in operation. On the screen, you can see the yellow square or rectangle that indicates the location of the proposed patio. In terms of hours of operation, while the pub is open from noon until 2 a.m. most days, the proposed patio would only be operational from noon until 11 p.m. When considering whether to opt in to comment on referrals from the LCRB, Council can consider the impact of the application on the community, adjacent neighbors, particularly with respect to potential noise, parking, vehicular traffic impacts. From staff's perspective, the impact is anticipated to be negligible given the site's location along one of the city's busier commercial corridors and existing activity generated by the surrounding businesses. It's worth highlighting that no concerns were raised during the internal referrals to bylaws and emergency services. So if Council chooses to opt into providing comment, Council Policy 196 provides a framework for obtaining public input via public notice and a public hearing. It's worth noting that an additional one-time cost of $1,600 would be payable by the applicant to cover those costs associated with public consultation. Staff's recommendation is that Council opt out of providing comment to the LCRB structural change application. It's worth just reminding everybody that if the city does opt out of providing comment, this does not mean that there will not be public consultation. It just means that it's going to be led by the LCRB in terms of it will be their responsibility. Last two images were part of the staff report. Again, just an image from the parking lot adjacent to TC's where the patio is proposed to go. And then a diagram provided by the applicant to show you what the 20-unit or 20-person patio is proposed to look like. And that is all I have for you. I'm here for your questions.
Would somebody like to put forward? Councillor Isaacson.
Questions?
Yes.
So you mentioned the province decide if we approve the recommendation, the province decides if or how to do public engagement. Based on your experience, do you think they would? What might that look like?
Through the chair to Councillor Isaacson, my experience is that they do. It's just to the degree that they do, we don't know. And I can think of previous applications where it was simply signage that they put up to, much like we do for a development application. The sign goes up on the property, allows a certain period of time for people to reach out to the LCRB and get more information.
And follow-up question, if there are subsequent complaints that come in, if there are noise issues in the future, is it through our bylaw team or how would that complaints be resolved?
Initially, it would be through our bylaws team, and then we would reach out to the LCRB if there was a reason why we wanted to have a permit revoked. But yeah, initially it's our in-house teams.
The questions, Councillor Silka?
No question.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification. I believe if a year ago we went through a similar process for iguanas wanting a outdoor permit. Am I correct?
Through the chair, I'm trying to remember if it's exactly the same, but I believe it was to have live music. That was a little different. So this is an outdoor patio that was to have live music, some dancing and such. Yes.
Okay. Remember opting out of that one, I think, too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody like to put a motion on the Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. I have some questions. My first question was, if we opt out, does that mean we don't have to charge the $1,600 fee that you referred to? And then my second question was, does the using the outdoor patio till 11 p.m. fit with our noise bylaws for that area?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, in terms of your first question, yes, it would mean the applicant did not have to pay the additional $1,600 to the city. The second, the noise bylaw would be more about the amount of noise generated. It does align with the similar activities in the area, so we do allow for that type of use. It's the noise bylaw would be triggered if people were out, and often it's tied to amplified music. So if there was music being played outside, yes.
So I guess my question that I was more specifically asking is, I know that in residential areas, noise is to not be, happening past, I think it's 8 p.m. And in some other zones, the times are different. And I just was curious about what the noise bylaw for this zone is.
Through the chair, I'd have to look exactly the difference. I don't actually recall there being a difference between zones. That's not my recollection. I think in the case of I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the exact language in the noise bylaw, but I don't know if it's a decibel level or something to that effect, but there is a no noise. I mean, arguably people do enjoy our public realm long after 8 p.m. In other situations. So, and it's not a noise bylaw complaint. So I think there is a way to do it that wouldn't trigger the noise bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Somebody like to put a motion? Councillor Almeida.
Move that council opt out of providing comment on the LCRB structural change application by TC's Pub located at 4660 Joyce Avenue, Powell River, to add an outdoor patio to its existing liquor primary license.
Councillor Thom, do we have any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Isaac.
Yeah, just want to raise one concern. I still support the motion, but there was a mention that because this is near a major artery, that there's likely going to already be noise that people that live in the area will experience. And I know that there's multifamily dwellings across Joyce there and in behind, on top of like Panago and Cannabis Store. And as someone who also lives near Joyce, it's actually pretty quiet after 5 or 6 p.m. And so the difference between the low hum of traffic in the background versus people laughing out on a patio, I think might trigger noise complaints. I could totally be wrong, but I just foresee that as possible in the future. But I support the Liquor and Cannabis Review Board doing that public engagement and for us to opt out of the process.
Great. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gao. 8.2 is the Powell River Community Forest 2024 Spring Grants. Our CAO.
Good evening, Council. So I'm going to introduce this report you have before you, and I have several staff here with me to help answer questions. I do apologize that our finance staff are off at a conference, so they're not here with us. So what you have before you is the annual spring grants for Council's consideration. Staff have presented 2 options for you to consider. Option 1, as you see before you, includes the recommendations from the Powell River Community Forests, with the exception of 2 city-owned properties that were already allocated during the 2024 budget from the Powell River Community Forest Funds. You'll also notice that there is a slight amendment to the 100,000 for the Triangle Gardens to put some criteria there that enables staff to work successfully with that particular funding. And then option 2, the difference there between option 1 and 2 is that the 2 projects that weren't included in the Powell River Community Forest recommendation, which was 700,000 for airport capping and approximately 107,000 for a crosswalk near the Larry Guthrow Park, is that Council had the option of changing the funding source for that from community forests that was dedicated through the budget process to the Canada Community Building Fund. So should you do that, that will have some implications for taxes. But those are your options, and just want to thank the Community Forest Board for working with us to come up with some creative options to move forward this year. Thank you. Oh, through the chair, I might add that we also have the chair of the Community Forest Board here, should you have any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think I would like to move option 1. I'm just wondering, should I read that entire option out for the corporate officer, or can we just say it's option 1?
Through the chair, yes, please read it all out. Thank you.
Okay. I move that Council direct staff to amend City of Powell River 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 2742-2024 to 1, include projects 346 to 364 and 374 in the amount of 1,909,862 as recommended in the letter dated May 29th, 2024 from the Powell River Community Forest Limited, Appendix A in the package.
Wrong motion.
Is it option 1?
You apparently have the wrong.
No, I think you're good.
Which option did you intend to read?
Option 1. I'm reading
That's
option
8.3.
1.
Sorry, Councillor Southcott.
Thank
Am
you,
I-
Mayor. We're on,
Just Councillor Elliott, I just want to make sure that we're all in the same wavelength. So Councillor Southcott.
thank you, Worship. I believe we're discussing agenda item 8.2, and that's the recommendation that Councillor Elliott read is the recommendation from 8.3, 8.2.
She's reading 8.2, option 1.
Okay, let's go through the chair, please.
Well, I was trying to read it anyway. I got interrupted.
All right, Councillor Doubt.
I think maybe some of the confusion is that the options that Councillor Elliott has chosen one of are not on the agenda. They're in the report.
Yes,
There is-
because
there
8.2
is a-
doesn't
there is
have
a-
it written on the agenda. It has it written in the report.
Yeah, there are two rather complex, at least two, I think three rather complex options there that don't show up in the agenda that are on the report.
Just
So
for
I would,
cer-
I would,
just-
sorry,
just
I
for
was,
certainty, I think we're on page 59 of the material that was put out. And it has to do with option 1, total city and PRCF request. Is that correct, Councillor Elliott?
absolutely correct, Your Worship. And I couldn't quite finish reading it before I was
Yeah,
interrupted.
please, would you continue?
So I'd gotten to point 2, include project 339 Triangle Gardens in the amount of 100,000 subject to the following. A, the approval of the proposed Powell River Community Forest funded project manager for city projects funded by the Powell River Community Forest Reserve Fund. B, the city would prepare and enter into an agreement between the city and TRA outlining the roles and responsibilities of this project. I believe TRA is the Townsite Ratepayers Association. The agreement would outline that the city will directly own, fund, and manage the project in consultation with TRA and has final approval and sign-off on each stage of the project, including, without limitation, the project design to ensure that the project meets the city's visual and maintenance requirements. D, the labor is contracted out and paid for by the proposed grant budget. And 3, defer the $2,886,451 of funding for the Aquatic Center roof from 2024 to 2025.
Councillor Isaacs.
I'm seconding the motion.
Thank you. So we'll open this for discussion. Councillor Doubt.
I've just got one simple question, and the townsite ratepayers were here not that long ago, just Tuesday night, proposing an agreement with the city, a three-way agreement between the townsite ratepayers, the city, and the union, because they were talking about needing union agreement with CUPE to have volunteers work in the garden. And that's the agreement with CUPE is the only thing that I don't see written in this motion.
Through the chair, I'll attempt to answer this before I hand over to Director Bretzlaff if I get it wrong. So Townsite Ratepayers Association came to us with questions about ongoing maintenance about the gardens in the long term. This particular 100,000 is to address getting contractors in to do work that is beyond the scope of the volunteers related to tree stumps that were left behind through a BC Hydro cut. Am I correct, Director Bretzlaff?
Through the chair, partially correct. These funds would be improving the current Triangle Gardens. The intent of this improvement would address a few things. One, potentially part of those tree stumps, but the original plan was to overall improve the gardens, improve the irrigation of those gardens, and lower the maintenance standards of those gardens. So regardless where the agreement lands or doesn't land between the union, the association, and the city, the maintenance standards would be decreased regardless, which would help everybody in the long run.
Okay, I was curious to know.
Councillor Thom.
Yes, Your Worship. Usually when we present the grant applications past, we have asked the president of deforest to come forward and say description of proposal. And since this is a different format that we have usually done, because we usually just rubber stamp what sent us previously, I would really like to hear from the president to outline not only to us, but to the public, the difference between option 1 and option 2 that they're recommending, so that everybody's on the same page.
Would you like to come forward and provide that information?
Well, just there was a piece missing from the agenda that came with our letter, and that's the Community Forest Reserve Fund bylaw. We're just putting that up right now. That was in our letter of grant recommendations and was attached, and it wasn't included in the agenda package there. And some of our discussion, as you know, is about whether those 2 other projects, in fact, comply with the city's own bylaw or not. So you can see on the overhead, first of all, as noted here, we've been at this for 16 years or so. It's always been a collaborative process. This is the first time we've come with a set of recommendations where there's an alternate set of recommendations coming from staff. And so that was a bit of a surprise to us. We thought we'd hash that out offline. We're caught a little bit off guard on that. So there was 2 projects, city projects, that we didn't believe fit into the intent of the Community Forest Reserve Fund bylaw. And you can see the bylaw up there. It's been around since 2008. It stood the test of time. It essentially was council's pledge at the time on what the funds were going to be used for. So yes, it's vague in some situations, but pretty clear in other situations what the intent of the fund is there. So reserve fund was established. Reserve in name only. The idea was these monies would be would feed direct investment back into the community, much needed direct investments. Dividends received from the community forest were placed into the Community Forest Reserve Fund. It's a city reserve. And the description is the monies of the Powell River Community Forest Reserve Fund will be used for special community projects that will benefit the community as a whole. It's actually based in the regional district, so it's not a fund. Council's asked to put on a little different hat when they're considering what they're going to do with this fund there. The money in the reserve fund is not to be used for city operations or for capital expenditures of a regular nature. Fairly specific there. And then before any money is used from the reserve fund, the city will seek input from the board of directors from the Powell River Community Forest Limited there. So now the city has a separate capital budgeting process, capital plan. But at the end of the day, they're not considered where funds are coming from the Community Forest Reserve Fund. There's that extra staff, and I'm sure staff have advised council, have you gone along, that we need to seek input from community forests there. Councils of the past asked that that input would be put in the form of recommendations, formal recommendations through motion of our board and the formal letter you see in front of you today in the agenda packet. So it's our view, and we're going over old ground with council, but the 2 projects, the one to cap the garbage dump at the end of the runway is not something that is intended to be funded by the Community Forest Reserve Fund. The other ones, crosswalks, there's lots of crosswalks all over the city and the regional district. This is the first time one's come forward to be funded out of the reserve funds. And in our minds, seems like those are capital expenditures of a regular nature. So those are the reasons. There's another, as we went over with council, there's also other funding sources for capping the airport dump. And one of those is the sale of the timber that was undertaken on behalf of the city by Powell River Community Forest. $3 million was deposited into reserves to be used on that airport project. So that is our feeling, is shouldn't be taking money out of the reserve fund that's specific to other community projects to cap the dump there. Thank you.
So could you address Councillor Palm's question? What is the difference, just so that everybody online in the audience that hasn't the same experience as council, what is the major difference between option 1 and option 2?
Well, the major difference is the two projects that we feel shouldn't have been included. The capping the airport dump and the crosswalks under the bylaw shouldn't be eligible for grant funding. Our recommendation letter is in front of you. Formal, this was supposed to be copied to it, but it wasn't. So that's the difference. Option 1, the city staff would like you to approve as a grant from the community forest. We're saying it's not eligible. Now that's our input.
And just for greater clarity, what is the amount of those two projects?
Through the chair, the amount of those two projects total are approximately 808,000. And I would like to provide some clarity here. Staff are not actually providing a recommendation to you. What we've done is given two options for you to consider, because in the 2024 budget process, because of the partly situation we're in financially, and also the massive dividends that came through this year, council allocated money from community forests to do these two projects. So the options you have allow you to make a change to that funding source, either carry on, have it as it is in the budget, which is coming from the community forest dividends, or to reallocate it to another funding source. So we are very deliberate here. We are not recommending. We're leaving this as a political decision with the dividends that have come to you to follow through the recommendations and the analysis that community forests have given you. Thank you.
To help just to help the public understand, if option 1 proceeded and the city had to find other sources for those two projects, what is the approximate impact on the average household tax?
Through the chair, it would be option 2 that would take that, would be the one that would reallocate that to another funding source. And the impact per household I don't have, but it would potentially, it would result in a shortfall in property tax increases of approximately 3.3% in 2026. So it'd be deferred.
And just to be clear, because we had to do some of our own digging, within that capital plan, it's a plan, obviously shifting target there, but there is other projects in there that are more suitable to be funded by the Community Forest Fund, more suitable than capping a dump. So the budget pressures, they can be addressed in the future. There's some question, as you heard, that whether this project can even be completed this year.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry, we're here hashing this out.
Oh, it's okay.
At this time, it's usually a much different kind of meeting we have when this is happening. So I am apologizing for that. So what I see in option 2 at the end, go down to number 4 in the paragraph, there's an outline that $700,000 and the $100,000 for the two different projects could be funded by the Canada Community Building Fund Reserve. That's other money that the city has received in grants. It's not tax money. Obviously, if there's things, we've used that to cover these two projects. We're using actual real money, but it's not money we're collecting from taxpayers right now. So it doesn't have a direct cost to the taxpayer. But what I understand, maybe the CAO can clarify, if we chose option 2 instead of option 1, we'd still be funding those projects, but we would be taking the funds from the Canada Community Building Fund. That is money we have.
And sorry, through the chair. I mean, we're sympathetic to budget pressures. We understand that, but the fund isn't designed to offset increased in costs and those sorts of things. But it is a byproduct if we do find other projects that can be funded by the Community Forest Reserve Fund. In this case, though, two were put forward, which we don't feel fits the city's bylaw.
Any other questions?
Any questions right now? No
Questions? Councillor Thom.
So in terms of questions, Your Worship, we have on the screen before us is pretty clear. We have an existing bylaw. It explicitly states that capital expenditures of a regular nature do not come from the Community Forest Reserve Fund. So the sidewalks and the capping of that airport end of the runway are capital projects. I don't, option 1 contravenes our bylaw, and I'm not about to vote for option 1. As Councillor Dowd has pointed out, we have other options for funding. We have the Canada Community Building Fund. We also have monies that we received from the taking down of trees at the airport on the airport land could be utilized, and those funds are substantial and they're in a reserve somewhere, I believe. So the Community Forest Board and their volunteers have put over, by the time the fall proceeds are spent this year, over $30 million to rebuild the city of Powell River. I can't thank them enough for what they have done. And I will not contravene the bylaw tonight. And I thank them for all their due diligence and hard work. And I appreciate working with them diligently in the future. So I will be defeating the motion on the floor and asking to put forward option 2 tonight. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay.
We're in discussion now, are we?
Yes.
Okay, I have a comment as well.
Yeah, Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've given this a lot of hard thought, and because the contention obviously was made to us before tonight with respect to the interpretation of the bylaw. Bylaw is worded very simply. There was extensive, I think it was a year and a half of consideration of interpretation of the bylaw during the rewriting of Policy 261, which provides pretty prescriptive guidelines to interpretation of the bylaw. And this was done about between 6 and 7 years ago, as I can remember. And I've watched the Community Forest Board, for which I have great appreciation, the amount of work and benefit to this community, not only in the dividends of the community forest, but in the volunteer work that's been provided by this board. This board represents a profound body of expertise and experience. So I think we are actually facing a more fundamental question, and that is of the bylaw. And I really don't think we should be discussing that tonight. But I have gone over this and over this and over this in my mind, trying to justify, because we are for sure in much greater financial stress than we've been in the past, and possibly risk facing our future. Well, it's my belief for sure. So I cannot support this motion for option 1 either, in good conscience. I think we need to address again, maybe go back into a long discussion process again. And I just have to say parenthetically, I appreciate also the amount of capital that has gone into what essentially is city-owned projects, like, for example, the rec complex over the years, and the amount that is intended in the future to go into the rec complex, which is obviously a regional facility, so it benefits the community at large. Anyway, getting in further down into the weeds here is just debate that I don't even want to have, but I have reservations that leave me not being able to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Isaacson and Councillor Doubt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a lot of appreciation for the Community Forest Board and the way that they approach working with grantees. And I also have really high appreciation for staff. They have a very detailed view of city finances, have a very big picture of city finances, and also are, deeply aware of reserve funds, funding sources, and the legal interpretation of this bylaw. And so staff have shared with us the financial implications of the 2 recommendations. They've given us 2 options, and this council is making a political decision. I support the motion on the floor. I believe that the community safety aspects of those 2 specific crosswalks and the environmental protection of the landfill capping. I know it references airport extension, but we're not looking at extending the airport because of what's there. We need to environmentally remediate that and deal with environmental protection. And so the not a regular nature and community benefit, I can support the legal interpretation that staff have received on this bylaw. I think if we don't pass this motion, what will happen is a year or 2 from now, when the results of this decision get made, if we choose option 2, because the community in the staff report, the CCBF, the Community Canada Community Building Fund, for example, is used for pavement management. We're going to be looking at property tax increase or deferring pavement management program. And so other things that, as Councillor Doubt correctly said, it's not immediately connected to taxpayer money, but every time we use reserves, those reserves can't be used for other things like pavement management. And so given staff's deep understanding of the big picture, of the details, of all the funding sources available to them and the legal interpretation of this bylaw, I support the motion made.
Councillor Doubt.
So, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Thom on this, that I think option 2 is the right way to go. And I have a respect for the city's financial staff and for the Community Forest Board and all the work that goes on there, and the bylaw. And I think it's important to do those projects. And if we choose option 2, those 2 additional projects, the capping of the landfill and the Larry Guthrow Park crosswalk, will be built. It'll be built by funds that the city has. And I am concerned for the future well-being and the taxation and the apportionment of projects in the future. But, I've been, Councillor Southcott and I've had a few long talks about how do we solve the tension here, because there is a tension between the bylaw and the city's, growing need for money. To just put it that way. And I think the way to do that, rather than try to figure it all out tonight in detail, which I don't think is a pretty good idea, because it's not early, it's getting later. I think what we should do is think about, over the period of the next year, sitting down as a city council and staff and in partnership with the community forest and reviewing the pressures and the needs and the desires about the community forest bylaw. I don't think we should try to solve the problem together in one night because it's too big a problem. And everybody contributes a great deal. The community forest contributes a huge amount to this community, and we need to protect that. We need to protect the integrity of the process. So I would prefer to defeat option one and go with option two, and then at another time, not long from now, set up a process to work on the community forest bylaw so we can be more in line as we go to the process next year.
We have a Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe, based on what I'm going to say, I'm going to put the final decision in your pocket. I am also in favor of this current motion. I appreciate the work that the community forest did in providing the input to council, and much like staff provides input to council on many things throughout the year, council has the tough decision whether to accept that input as is or bring their own spin on it. When I read operations for capital expenditures of a regular nature, I don't see the airport and a sidewalk as regular nature because we're not doing those on a regular basis. I think there's actually some other items on the list that could be better argued as a regular nature, and they are on the list as it is. So I am in favor of this motion, and I am also in agreement that the bylaw does need to be relooked at again, but I don't believe that accepting the recommendation in option one would be against the bylaw as it's written.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed?
Your Worship, I've had my hand up for quite a while. I was actually going to speak on the motion.
I saw your hand. Thank you.
Oh.
The motion is defeated 4-3.
So I was denied my right to speak on the motion before it was called? I wasn't voting when my hand went up. I was trying to get your attention to speak.
All right. I'm going to ask Councillor Elliott to say what you would like to say.
Thank you. And I'd also ask that you recall the question after because I wasn't actually voting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I wanted to say was I really think it's best if we can come to consensus between council and the Community Forest Board. And I've heard the president of the Community Forest Board say that he believes there are items in the capital plan that are not currently allocated to the community forest that might suit the community forest that they could consider in the future. I don't have the information about which ones those are. I would like to say that the current plan has these particular projects identified by the community forest. I don't believe our staff or their legal advice on whether things fit or don't fit the bylaw are incorrect. I think they've put options forward that they believe are legal and comply with our bylaws. I beg to differ that the capping of grandfathered, landfill sites is a regular nature thing we're doing. It's a list of things that we have to address when the environmental management objectives changed and we became responsible for capping and dealing with environmental matters that are definitely of benefit to the entire community. Ensuring that we are complying with environmental standards is important, but if it's to be assumed that it's of our regular nature, then we're in a lot of trouble as far as trying to get grants. We're basically relying on all grants for all of them for the most part. So I'm of two minds. I'm aware that there is not entirely agreement between the two boards on whether these projects fit or don't fit. I do not think that money that is in the the fund that we would take it out of that's already allocated to other projects in our plan. And as our CAO has pointed out, if we use the money for these projects, the money it was allocated to would then have to be funded from taxes 2 years from now in order to make that work out in the 5-year plan. So there is impacts to taxpayers for those paving projects that we have earmarked for that money. So if we defeat the motion, I think we can work with the Community Forest Board to find these other projects that they're talking about. And I have hope that that's possible. I wouldn't like to see this decision today result in a higher than planned need for taxation 2 years from now, because I think that's not something I'd like to see. So I'm going to vote in favor of the motion. But I do have hope that however this results today, that we can sort that out and find ways to use the community forest in a way that we can all agree on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm again going to call the motion. All in favor? Opposed?
Who?
Oh, we're voting on option 1. We're re-voting because Councillor Elliott. So okay. All in favor of the motion put forward by Councillor Elliott? Okay. Opposed to the motion put forward? Motion is defeated. Councillor Doubt.
Move option 2 in the June 6th report.
You have to read it.
But I would like one comment, Your Worship.
Okay, we have the motion seconded, and I'll open for discussion. Councillor Thom.
Thank you, Worship. Just want to make one comment in terms of both option 1 and option 2 for the public. And that is that in regards to our recreation center, aquatic center roof replacement, there is a total figure of $2,886,451. $2,886,451, and that is going to be deferred to the 2025 grant. So that is still on the table for the city. That does not change. It was in both option 1 and option 2. Just wanted to be perfectly clear. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Point of order.
Yes. Councillor Elliott.
I believe when I read out the initial motion, it was requested that I read the motion out, not just refer to it. And so we haven't had the motion read out, and I'm wondering if that is in order.
Councillor Doubt, would you like to read out, or should we ask our corporate office?
I'll read it, save time. We'll just read it. That council directs staff to amend the City of Powell River 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 2742-2024 to 1. Include projects numbered 346 to 364 and 374 in the amount of $1,909,862 as recommended in the letter dated May 29th, 2024 from Powell River Community Forest Limited, Appendix A of the June 6, 2024 report titled Powell River Community Forest 2024 Spring Grants. 2. Include Project 339, Triangle Gardens, in the amount of $100,000, subject to the following. A, the approval of the proposed PRCF funded project manager for city projects funded by the PRCF Reserve Fund. B, the city would prepare and enter into an agreement between the city and TRA as outlining the roles and responsibilities for this project. C, the agreement would outline that the city will directly own, fund, and manage this project in consultation with TRE and has a final approval and sign off on each stage of the project, including without limitation the project design, to ensure that the project meets the city's visual and maintenance requirements. D, labor is contracted out and paid for by the proposed grant budget. 3, defer the $2,886,451 of funding for the Aquatic Center roof from 2024 to 2025. And 4, change the funding source for the $700,000 airport landfill capping, phase 1 of the airport extension, and $107,600 for the new crosswalk projects, Alberni/Ontario and Larry Guthrow Park, from the Powell River Community Forest Reserve Fund to the Canada Community Building Fund, CCBF.
You, Councillor Doubt, we have the motion on the floor.
It hasn't been seconded?
I believe it had been seconded, but okay. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion passes 5-2. Thank you.
Okay.
All.
Through the chair, if I might, before Mr. Hempel speaks, a point of clarification that's really important for our relationship with community forests. The bylaw in question was embedded as a link in the report. So I would hate for Mr. Hempel and his team to think that we had deliberately left it out. So for brevity in the report, the bylaw is linked. It's on page 1. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Hempel. I'm going to.
Okay, what's next?
I'm going to call a 8-minute recess.
Are the community forest folks coming back after the 8-minute recess?
Probably not.
Okay, before you
It's been a
go,
long day.
before you go, it's been a long evening. I want to say thank you to all of you and to the Community Forest Board and to all of the volunteers who are being funded by the grants that have been approved tonight and the good it does to the community. So thanks very much for staying up this late, and thanks for the work you do.
Well, and thanks for council. It's a good debate. And for Councillor Elliott, we have standing offer to work with city staff to go through the capital plan and find projects that would match up better to the Community Forest Reserve Fund bylaw there. Thank you.
So 8-minute break.
for runway rehabilitation. We also received an amendment to that original agreement that allowed us to extend the completion date to March 31 of 2025. The eligible project expenditures, though, allowed for a maximum of $300,000 for engineering design and project management. What we're facing is an estimated cost to a maximum of $410,000. The reason for the three going over that 300,000, one, it was lower than typical estimates for project management and design, which are typically between 5 and 10%. As well, we had underestimated the effort required to meet the landfill geotechnical issues that we had asked our designers to review the previous specifications that we had received from a previous consultant. The overall project budget is going to be well below the $8 million, but unfortunately, ACAP will not fund beyond the $300,000 on the design and project management. So therefore, we've reached out to Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program, CERAP, who provided us funding in the past for the landfill capping and runway extension over. And we've had conversations with them to pivot this funding to allow for CERAP funding to cover this cost overrun. Although we do not have a formal agreement, we've had verbal communication that said that they're definitely in favor of covering this cost overrun, as well as some other elements around the airport for us. Unfortunately, we don't have a formal agreement just yet. So what we're looking for, though, is a budget amendment that would allow for the CERAP funding to be utilized. And should that not be granted from CERAP, that the $110,000 would be allocated from the General Capital Reserve Fund. So this is essentially a budget amendment, but we're still looking at zero cost to the taxpayers.
Councillor Almeida, do you have any questions?
No questions. I can make the motion if there's no other questions.
Councillor Isaacson?
Yeah, one question. So we've gone, I'm assuming that from the original beginning of the grant, we knew there was a maximum. And I'm wondering at what time we realized that that engineering and project management piece was going to go above that.
We weren't certain that that 300 was a maximum when we were discussing with ACAP. We looked at that the total of $8 million, and once we got the construction budget in there, we knew that we were well within that range. Until we had some final discussions just a few months ago with ACAP, and they noted that they would cap that funding at $300,000.
Any questions, Councillor Doat?
No.
Healthcott.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott, any questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a question.
Councillor Palm, any questions?
Happy we found another source of funding.
Okay, could we have a motion on the floor, please? Councillor Almeida.
Move that council direct staff to prepare a budget amendment to the City of Powell River 5-year financial plan bylaw 2742-2024 to amend this funding source for $110,000 of the approved project cost for the airport rehabilitation project to be taken from CERAP funding. And further, that should the CERAP funding grant extension not be approved, the $110,000 will be funded from the city's general capital reserve.
We have a seconder. Second by Councillor Isaacson. Any further discussion before I put the motion? All in favor of the motion? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 8.4, dissolution, Powell River Power Development Corporation, our Deputy Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Council. So pretty short report for you. In your January budget deliberations, staff was directed as one of your cost-saving measures to dissolve the Powell River Power Development Corporation. So staff began the process of doing that with legal. The first step is Council is the sole shareholder, approving the consent resolution as attached in your package. And then I take that, continue with legal, and the corporation should be dissolved in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Thank you. Normally we go around the circle, but this seems a little straightforward. Are there any questions? Councillor Isaacson and then Councillor Doubt.
No questions. I was going to make the motion, so if Councillor Dutt has questions, I can pass.
Just a quick one. How much did the final audit that we had to do to close it down cost?
I believe it was. We haven't done the 2024 audit yet, so there will be the final audit cost once it's closed. So I don't have those yet. I would imagine they're probably close. An audit is an audit, so I think it'll be around the 2,600, but other than that.
Okay, close enough.
Councillor Isaacson.
Yeah, I move that Council approve the consent resolution to request dissolution of the Powell River Power Development Corporation.
Seconded by Councillor Southcott. Discussion, Councillor Thom.
Just through the chair, just one question, and that is, this is a partnership between the city and Thom and First Nation. Have we consulted First Nation? Maybe doing this?
I don't believe this is the partnering corporation. I think you're thinking of the I don't remember what it was called. It was, I believe, the Powell River Waterfront Development Corporation. The city was the sole shareholder for this corporation.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have the reports for information from the municipal directors. Councillor Doubt, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, and then Councillor Elliott can add on what I missed. So just go through some of the interesting correspondence, and you can find the details online. We had correspondence from the chair of the board of directors of the BC Ferries Authority about the new appointment of directors for the BC Ferry Corporation, and you'll be able to find those online at the regional district office. We had a letter which is of interest to city people here from Debbie Malthouse about improvements being desired for the Sultry Bay boat launch, which is basically the only boat launch south of town, and it's in pretty sad shape and almost unusable. We had the deputy commander of the RCMP talking about a meeting of have a commitment letter update from the RCMP for services, including services to Texada. And what else do we have? We had Lift Community Service with an invitation to participate in the homelessness task force for the city, and that was accepted and a member named. We talked about authorization for BC Transit's annual operating agreement with the regional district, which connects to the city's transportation services. Really all work seamlessly. We talked about the approach to dog control issues, and there were letters that came to the city and to the regional district of people complaining about attacks by dogs on trails, particularly one recently that involved people riding horses and being attacked by a dog. And we talked about having our staff at the regional district come up with a recommendation for an animal control bylaw or whatever recommendations can be done. And I think that's of interest in the city as well. We talked about our UBCM resolution about permissive tax exemptions for nonprofit societies. And so the city can do that, but apparently the regional district can't. So they're lobbying to have that included. And that's going to be one of the concepts we talk about at the UBCM, including trying to get the highways department to take care of culverts on the roads, because that's a never-ending problem. We talked about approving the 2023 Statement of Financial Information, and that's where we report on all the salaries of all the people at the boards, the regional district board, and all of the employees, where the province requires us to list all the employees that get more than $75,000 a year. So the board approved that, and that is in our minutes. And we had a closed session. That was it. Exciting day. The other item of interest, it wasn't board interest, but our last regional hospital district board, I stepped down as the chairperson of that board and make room for Director Gisborne from south of town, who is now the new chair of that board. Still a member of the board, still a member of the regional district, but we're all moving on to greater things. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Director Elliott.
Your report was very thorough, Director Doubt, and I have nothing to add.
Well, in that case, we will move to bylaw 10, bylaw 2746, a zoning bylaw amendment 126. Who would like to speak to that from staff?
Through the chair to your worship, I will just highlight that this is the bylaw associated with the development on Manson Street or Manson Avenue. Staff are proposing that the bylaw be read with subject conditions, first, second, and third time. For those of you who think this might be a new thing, it is. This is because of the legislation that changed around Bill 44 that allows us to no longer hold, I won't say allows us, prohibits us from holding a public hearing, and therefore can move a little bit more quickly through the required readings of a bylaw. So unless there's further questions, I'll leave it with that.
Councillor Isaacson.
I do have one question. Obviously, this proposal changed because it's townhomes, more homes instead of single family. One other change that was quite significant is where the street access is. So no longer on Joyce, but off of Manson. And I'm wondering if you're able to speak to why that change was necessary or preferred. I thought originally there was going to be a road to Joyce, and it was subject to crossing, having an agreement with that property owner, and it went south to Joyce. I'm not making.
Through the chair, and to Councillor Isaacson, I know that was part of the discussion, but I think it was not a requirement of the approving officer. I think it was a statement by the applicant at the time that they were going to gain access that way, and perhaps that's why there was a requirement to show the approving officer that could be achieved. Sorry, what I'm getting at there, and it comes back to our bylaws that restrict the length of a road with a turnaround, and I think it was in light of that to achieve that secondary access point is what it was about. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. One question that I guess I remember for other projects that we've looked at in the past year and a half. I remember one or two that we've seen that fire was consulted in terms of entrances and being able to get in and out. That may have been looked at in this case, but we didn't physically see it. So I'm just curious, I guess, if fire has been consulted with the new design and what their thoughts are.
Through the chair to Councillor Almeida, that's a great question. One of the things that again, to separate the distinction, or distinguish between a rezoning application and a development permit application. Not that we don't engage fire at the very outset on all of these development applications, but once they see a development permit application, in this case, they're able to look at the access that's being proposed and have a little bit more to say. And so in this case, because the development permit application, I'm trying to remember, I know we've received it. I don't know if it's been referred out. They may have actually already looked at it from a rezoning perspective. Keep in mind that this is multifamily. It's all one property. It's a stratified property. It's a little different than where we may be looking at it from, like I was just speaking to, an emergency or secondary access point, because it's a city right of way.
Would somebody care to put the motion? So Southcott.
Thank you, Worship. I move that City of Powell rezoning bylaw 2100/2006, amendment bylaw 2746/2024 be read a first time, subject to the following conditions. 1, confirmation from the province that an assessment for the portion of stream that crosses the subject property has been reviewed and meets the requirements of the riparian areas protection regulation. 2, a requirement that the applicant complete associated subdivision application 286 that proposes to subdivide 5201 Manson Avenue into 2 lots, 1 lot that will house the existing single-family dwelling and a second larger lot that will accommodate the proposed development. 3, a requirement that the applicant register a Section 219 restrictive covenant against the title of the larger lot proposed as part of the subdivision application 286 in favor of the city that limits any further subdivision of these lands. 4, a requirement that the applicant confirm that city water, storm sewer, and sanitary sewer infrastructure has adequate capacity to service proposed development. And 5, a requirement that the applicant work with staff to secure their voluntary community amenity contribution offer as outlined in their statement of intent and CAC offer proposal letter attached to the May 2, 2024 staff report as appendices F and G respectively. City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006 amendment bylaw 2746/2024 be read second time, subject to the conditions outlined at the first reading.
Sorry, Chair.
We'd be doing one at a time. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, do we have a seconder for Councillor Southcott? Seconded by Councillor Isaacson. Any further discussion before I call the motion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006 amendment bylaw 2746/2024 be read a second time, subject to the conditions outlined at the first reading.
And by Councillor Isaacson. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Southcott.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006 amendment bylaw 2746/2024 be read a third time, subject to the conditions outlined in the first reading. At the first reading.
All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. We will now move to 10.2, which is bylaw 2749. Councillor Isaacson.
I think given we've gone through this before, I was going to go straight to reading the motion. All right. I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006 amendment bylaw 2749/2024 be read a first time.
Second by Councillor Almeida. All in favor? Passed unanimously.
I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006 amendment bylaw 2749/2024 be read a second time.
Second by Councillor Almeida. All in favor? Passed unanimously.
And I move that before I move the third time, I just want to clarify for people that are listening, we've been doing a number of bylaw amendments related to provincial legislation. This one specifically referencing Bill 44, and it references the implications of the small scale housing units that allow for more dwellings on a single property. Anyways, I got that right? Yep. And I finally move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006, amendment bylaw 2749/2024 be read a third time.
Seconded by Councillor Almeida. All in favor? Passed unanimously. We'll now move to 10.3, which is bylaw 2750, again dealing with Bill 44, delegation bylaw amendment. Councillor Almeida.
Sure, I'll take a go at it here. Just as we did in the previous one, I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006, amendment bylaw 2750/2024 be read a first time.
Good. Councillor Isaacson, all in favor? Passed unanimously.
I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006, amendment bylaw 2750/2024 be read a second time.
By Councillor Isaacson, all in favor? Passed unanimously.
I move that City of Powell River zoning bylaw 2100/2006, amendment bylaw 2750/2024 be read a third time.
By Councillor Isaacson, all in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We now move to questions. Mr. Belinsky. Would anybody in the audience have a question? Anybody online have a question? Great. Ready, Councillor Almeida.
I move that council move into a closed meeting to discuss matters covered by the community charter under sections 90.1, E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. And I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Seconded by Councillor Isaacson. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Now go to a closed meeting. Crowd to please leave.